January 22nd, 1879. Dawn breaks over the Zulu kingdom. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Puliine stands outside his tent at Isandlwana, squinting toward the rocky plateau that rises like a crouching lion against the African sky. The air is cool, unusually still. Around him, 1,700 British and colonial troops are beginning their morning routines, boiling tea, cleaning rifles, joking in that casual way soldiers do when they believe themselves invincible. They have every reason to feel confident. The British Empire spans a quarter of the globe. Its armies have crushed rebellions in India, subdued uprisings in Afghanistan, and carved nations from continents. The soldiers here represent the most technologically advanced military force in human history. They carry Martini Henry breech-loading rifles that can fire 11 rounds per minute with devastating accuracy up to 600 yards. They have artillery. They have discipline honed over centuries of warfare. And their enemy? Savages with cowhide shields and sharpened sticks. One officer remarked at dinner the previous evening, drawing laughter from his peers. This dismissive attitude permeates every level of command. The Zulu warriors, known locally as the Impi, fight with stabbing spears called Iklwa and carry shields made from cattle hide. They wear minimal armor. They have no firearms to speak of. To the British officers sipping brandy in their canvas command tents, this isn't war. It's pest control. Lord Chelmsford, the commanding general, is so unconcerned about Zulu military capability that he's split his force. Right now, he's miles away with half the column, chasing what he believes is the main Zulu army. He's left Puliine behind with explicit orders. Defend the camp, maintain the supply line, don't do anything dramatic. The camp itself sits in the shadow of Isandlwana Mountain, spread across open ground with virtually no defensive fortifications. No laager of wagons. No trenches. No proper defensive perimeter. British military doctrine, forged in European battlefields, doesn't account for enemies who move like water and strike like lightning. Puliine isn't worried. He shouldn't be. Every military manual, every strategic assessment, every ounce of imperial experience tells him the Zulus will break against British firepower like waves against a steel hull. Around 8 a.m., mounted scouts return with reports. They've spotted Zulu forces on the plateau, maybe a few thousand warriors performing what looks like a ritualistic advance. Puliine dispatches companies to investigate. The Martini Henrys will make short work of them. What none of these men understand, what their arrogance won't allow them to see, is that they're not looking at a few thousand warriors. They're looking at the tip of a 20,000-man spear. Somewhere beyond that plateau, concealed in a hidden valley, the main Zulu army sits in absolute silence. They've been there since before dawn, arranged in the classic horns of the buffalo formation that has crushed armies for generations. The chest, the main force. The left horn and right horn, encircling wings designed to surround and suffocate. And the loins, the reserve force that will exploit any weakness. These warriors didn't stumble into battle. They've marched over 50 miles in near total secrecy. They've concealed their movements through terrain the British consider impassable. And they've done something the Empire's generals thought impossible. They've achieved complete tactical surprise against a modern army. The Zulus have studied their enemy. They know the British rely on their rifles. They know those rifles take time to reload. They know that if they can close the distance fast enough, if they can get inside that killing zone where bullets fly, the advantage shifts to the blade. Back at camp, soldiers are still making breakfast. Lieutenant Puliine checks his pocket watch. 10:30 a.m. The reconnaissance companies should be returning soon with reports of scattered Zulu warriors retreating in disarray. Instead, what comes over the plateau is something else entirely. A mounted officer appears at full gallop, his horse lathered with sweat, his face drained of color. He's shouting something, but his words are lost in the sudden, impossible sound rolling across the plain like thunder. 20,000 voices, chanting in perfect unison. 20,000 shields, beating against 20,000 spears. The sound of an empire's nightmare made flesh. 10:47 a.m. The horizon is moving. At first, the British soldiers squint in confusion. The rocky plateau seems to be shifting, undulating like a dark tide spilling over stone. Then the realization hits with physical force. That's not the landscape changing. That's an army. The Zulu Impi crests the ridgeline in a formation so vast, so perfectly coordinated, it defies everything these soldiers thought they knew about warfare. The chest of the buffalo advances in the center, a dense mass of 12,000 warriors moving with parade ground precision. To the left and right, the horns are already spreading wide, 2 wings of 4,000 men each, beginning their encircling maneuver. They're not charging recklessly. They're executing a tactical masterpiece. Lieutenant Pouliine feels his stomach drop. He immediately sends runners to recall the dispersed companies scattered across the plain. But it's too late. The companies are already engaged, already cut off, already dying in isolated pockets miles from camp. Form firing lines. The order ripples through the camp. British soldiers abandon their breakfast and scramble for ammunition. Officers bark commands, trying to impose order on mounting chaos. The well-drilled troops form up in their traditional formations. 2 ranks deep, standing shoulder to shoulder, rifles raised. This is what they've trained for. This is supposed to work. The first volleys crack across the plain at 11 a.m. sharp. The Martini-Henry rifles perform exactly as designed. At 400 yards, bullets tear through Zulu shields like paper. Warriors fall in waves. The front ranks of the chest stumble, falter, bodies crumpling into the grass. For a moment, just a moment, it seems the British confidence was justified. Then the Zulu warriors do something the Empire's soldiers have never seen before. They don't retreat. They drop. The entire front line throws themselves flat against the earth, disappearing into the long grass and rocky ground. The British soldiers hesitate, unsure where to aim. Their training never covered an enemy that uses terrain this intelligently. Behind the fallen warriors, fresh ranks surge forward. They're moving in a crouch now, using every dip in the landscape, every termite mound, every scattered boulder as cover. They advance in spurts, 20 yards at a sprint, then drop and crawl. Another burst of speed, then flatten again as bullets scream overhead. The British keep firing. The disciplined volleys become a continuous roar of gunfire. Smoke from black powder cartridges begins to obscure the battlefield. Soldiers are loading and firing as fast as their hands can move, 11 rounds per minute, just like training. But the Zulus are closing the distance. 600 yards becomes 500, then 400, then 300. And now the British soldiers are beginning to notice something terrifying. The ammunition supply is breaking down. In their arrogance, Lord Chelmsford's staff hadn't bothered to position ammunition reserves close to the firing lines. The wooden crates are still at the supply wagons, 200 yards behind the front. Worse, the crates are sealed with copper bands and 9 screws each. Designed to protect ammunition during long transport, but requiring tools and precious minutes to open under fire. Quartermasters are frantically prying at crates with bayonets and rifle butts. Runners are sprinting back and forth carrying single boxes of cartridges. Some soldiers are already shouting that they're down to their last rounds. The Zulu horns are completing their encirclement. The left horn has swept wide, faster than any British commander thought possible for an army on foot. They're moving at a sustained run that would exhaust European troops in minutes. But these warriors have trained since childhood to cover vast distances at this pace. They're behind the British right flank now, cutting off the road back to Rorke's Drift. The right horn mirrors them on the opposite side. The British aren't just facing a frontal assault. They're surrounded. 11:30 a.m. The chest of the buffalo is 200 yards away. At this distance, you can see individual faces. Young men, most of them, some barely old enough to grow beards. Their bodies are painted with ritual clay and animal fat. Cowtail ornaments whip behind them as they run. Each warrior carries the iklewa, a short stabbing spear with a blade as long as a man's forearm, and a knobkerry war club. The British volleys are still cutting them down. Bodies pile in the grass. But for every warrior that falls, 3 more keep coming. The Zulus have calculated something the British never considered: acceptable losses. They know hundreds will die in this charge. They've accepted it. Their tactics don't require every man to survive. They require enough men to reach the enemy lines. And there are always enough. 150 yards. Some British soldiers are firing so rapidly their rifle barrels are too hot to touch. Others are frantically fixing bayonets, hands shaking as they realize what's about to happen. 100 yards. The Zulu war cry, Usuthu, rises above the gunfire, a sound like nothing these colonial troops have ever heard. It's not a scream of rage. It's ceremonial, ritualistic, the sound of men fulfilling a sacred duty. 50 yards. And then the distance closes entirely. The first Zulu warriors slam into the British lines like a breaking wave hitting a seawall. But this seawall is made of flesh and bone, and it begins to shatter. 11:52 a.m. The line breaks. A Zulu warrior crashes into a British private with such force both men go down in a tangle of limbs. The soldier tries to bring his rifle around, but the barrel is too long, too unwieldy at this distance. The Isandlwana strikes once, a brutal upward thrust beneath the ribs, and the private's scream cuts short. This is happening all along the line. The Martini-Henry rifle is a magnificent weapon at 400 yards. At arm's length, it's a liability. British soldiers are clubbing with their rifle butts, stabbing desperately with bayonets, but they're trained for volleys and discipline, not hand-to-hand chaos. The Zulus are trained for exactly this. Every warrior has spent years perfecting the Isandlwana technique, a close-quarters killing method as efficient as it is brutal. The short blade is designed for a specific motion. Hook the enemy's shield or guard with your own cowhide shield, create an opening, drive the spear up under the ribcage or into the throat, withdraw, move to the next target. No wasted movement. No hesitation. It's not savage. It's surgical. Lieutenant Pouliane tries to establish a fallback position. He's shouting orders, but his voice is lost in the roar of combat. Company formations are disintegrating into desperate knots of men fighting for their lives. The careful British battle lines, those precise rows that conquered half the world, exist only as memory now. The Zulu horns have completed their encirclement. Soldiers at the camp's perimeter suddenly find enemies behind them. Men who thought they were in reserve positions are now in the front line. There is no front line. There's only killing from every direction. Some companies try to form defensive squares, the classic British tactic for exactly this scenario. But a square requires space, coordination, and time. They have none of these. The squares buckle and collapse under the weight of warriors who have no fear of dying. And die they do, in staggering numbers. The ground before the British positions is carpeted with Zulu dead. Some estimates will later count over 2,000 casualties among the Impi. But the British casualties are reaching 100%. The mathematics of the battlefield have become horrifically simple. The Zulus can afford their losses. The British cannot. 12:15 p.m. The artillery falls silent. The British gunners fought until Zulu warriors were literally climbing onto their cannon barrels. These men, trained to engage targets at hundreds of yards, found themselves in hand-to-hand combat with enemies who moved too fast, got too close. The guns fired their last rounds point-blank into charging formations, then the crews were overwhelmed. Now those same cannons sit silent among piles of bodies wearing red coats. Near the center of camp, a group of officers makes a stand around the regimental colors. These are men who've spent entire careers building the mystique of British invincibility. They know what losing these colors means, the ultimate military disgrace. They die defending fabric and pride. Lieutenant Tinmouth Melville grabs the Queen's color, a silk flag bearing the regiment's honors, and makes a desperate run for his horse. If he can save the colors, if he can get them to Rorke's Drift, perhaps something can be salvaged from this nightmare. He spurs his horse toward the Buffalo River, 5 miles away. Behind him, the camp is dying. Not all of the killing is face-to-face combat now. Small groups of British soldiers are trying to retreat, trying to break through the Zulu encirclement. Some make it 50 yards. Some make it 200. None make it to safety. The right horn of the buffalo has positioned itself perfectly along the escape routes. Warriors wait in the rocky ground like hunters at a game trail. Every fleeing soldier runs directly into fresh enemy forces. One colonial volunteer, his name lost to history, makes it almost a mile from camp before a thrown Isandlwana catches him between the shoulder blades. He falls face first into the African dirt, joining hundreds of others scattered across the plain in various stages of flight and death. Back at the camp center, Lieutenant Pouliane realizes there's no rallying point. No defensible position. No miracle coming over the hill. Lord Chelmsford is miles away, chasing phantoms. The nearest reinforcements might as well be on the moon. Pouliane draws his revolver. Around him, the last organized resistance is collapsing. Soldiers are breaking and running individually now, throwing away rifles, tearing off their red coats, desperate to blend into the landscape or outrun the warriors who seem to move like the wind itself. They don't outrun them. The Zulus have been running since childhood. Every warrior in this impi can maintain a pace that would destroy a European soldier in under an hour. These fleeing British troops, weighed down by equipment, panicked, exhausted from combat, have no chance. One by one, they're run down. Some British soldiers try to surrender. They drop their weapons, raise their hands, call out in English that means nothing to warriors operating under their own rules of engagement. The Zulus haven't come here for prisoners. They've come to destroy an invasion force that threatened their homeland. They're succeeding beyond even their own expectations. 12:45 p.m. The fighting in the camp center is nearly over. What remains is mostly hunting. Small groups of Zulu warriors moving through the wreckage, checking bodies, finishing wounded, stripping equipment. The British camp that woke up this morning in comfortable confidence is now a charnel house. Tents are collapsed and bloodstained. Wagons are overturned. Personal belongings are scattered across ground that's gone muddy with blood. The air smells of gunpowder, open bowels, and death. And still, some men are alive, running for their lives across the plain. The fugitives' trail stretches toward the Buffalo River, a desperate stream of humanity trying to reach the water, get across, find safety on the other side. British soldiers, colonial volunteers, native auxiliaries, all running together now, military hierarchy dissolved into pure survival instinct. Behind them, Zulu warriors pursue with the patience of men who know the hunt is already won. 1:10 p.m. 5 miles of dying. The landscape between Isandlwana and the Buffalo River is broken terrain. Rocky outcrops, thornbush, steep ravines carved by seasonal floods. In peacetime, it's difficult ground. In a panicked retreat with warriors at your heels, it's a killing field. Lieutenant Melville, still clutching the Queen's color, drives his horse hard across the plain. The silk flag streams behind him like a funeral shroud. Another officer, Lieutenant Coghill, has caught up to him. They don't speak, there's no breath for words, but their eyes communicate everything. Get to the river. Get across. Survive. Behind them, perhaps 200 men are attempting the same desperate escape. They're not traveling as a unit. There's no rearguard action, no organized withdrawal. It's a rout, the ugliest word in military vocabulary. Men stumble over rocks, go down with turned ankles, get back up and keep running. Some have kept their rifles. Most have thrown them away, choosing speed over the weight of weapons they have no ammunition to fire. The Zulu pursuit is methodical. The warriors don't charge blindly after every fleeing soldier. They work in groups, using the terrain, cutting off angles of escape. Some move parallel to the British retreat, herding them like cattle toward predetermined kill zones. Others position themselves on high ground, waiting for exhausted men to pass below. A colonial volunteer named Barker sees a gap in the pursuit, a narrow ravine that might offer concealment. He breaks from the main group of fugitives and scrambles down the rocky slope. For a moment, he thinks he's made it. The ravine is empty, quiet except for his own ragged breathing. Then he sees the Zulu warriors waiting at the far end. They've been there the whole time, patient as stone. Barker tries to turn back, but his legs are gone, his lungs are screaming. The Ikawa finds him before he makes 3 steps. This scene repeats itself across the plain in dozens of variations. A sergeant major, his name will never make it into the history books, makes it 3 miles from camp before a thrown spear catches him in the calf. He goes down hard, the bone shattered. He knows what's coming. He uses his last moments to draw his knife, choosing to meet death on his feet rather than his knees. He doesn't get the chance. The warriors are on him before he can stand. Not all of the killing is personal. Some fleeing soldiers simply collapse from exhaustion and terror. Hearts give out. Men drop mid-stride, dead before they hit the ground. Others fall and can't get back up, lying in the grass while their vision darkens and the sound of pursuit fades into a high-pitched ringing. The Zulus let some of these men die on their own. There's no honor in killing an enemy who's already defeated himself. But most don't get that mercy. 2 p.m. The Buffalo River comes into view. For the surviving fugitives, it looks like salvation. The river is swollen from recent rains, running fast and brown, but it's the border of Natal Colony. The other side is British territory. If they can just get across, if they can just reach that far bank, maybe they'll live. Lieutenant Melville reaches the river first. His horse is heaving, foam streaming from its mouth. He doesn't hesitate. He spurs the animal into the water, still gripping the Queen's color with one hand. The current is stronger than it looks. Melville's horse loses its footing almost immediately. The animal and rider are swept downstream in the churning brown water. Melville kicks free of the stirrups, holding the colors above his head like a drowning man holding onto driftwood. Lieutenant Coghill sees his fellow officer struggling and rides his own horse into the river. It's a suicide decision. His horse is as exhausted as Melville's, but officers don't abandon each other. That's the code. That's what separates civilization from savagery, or so they've been taught. Both men are swept away from their horses within seconds. They claw toward the far bank, fighting the current, fighting their own waterlogged uniforms. The Queen's color becomes an anchor, dragging Melville down. He won't let it go. Even now, even drowning, the symbolism matters. Behind them, other fugitives are plunging into the river. Some make it, some don't. Bodies float downstream, spinning slowly in the current, red coats bright against the muddy water. The Zulu warriors reach the riverbank. Most stop here. The pursuit has achieved its objective. The British column is destroyed, the invasion force shattered. Some warriors wade into the shallows to finish off struggling soldiers. But there's no mass crossing. The Buffalo River marks a boundary, and the impi respects it. But a handful of warriors do cross. Young men, mostly, eager to prove themselves, not ready for the battle to end. They swim the river with their shields held above their heads, their weapons strapped to their backs. On the far bank, Melville and Coghill drag themselves out of the water. They're safe. They've made it. The Queen's color is lost, ripped from Melville's grip by the current in the final yards, but they're alive. They collapse in the mud, lungs burning, limbs shaking. They never see the warriors who followed them across. The Icklewa strikes find both officers within seconds of each other. They die on British soil. 10 feet from the water they nearly died crossing, having survived a battle and a 5-mile retreat only to fall in the final moment. Their bodies will be found days later, lying side by side, identified by their rank insignia. By 3 p.m., the pursuit is over. The Zulu warriors begin the long walk back to Isandlwana. They move slower now, exhausted from hours of combat and pursuit. Some are wounded. Many are carrying British rifles and equipment, practical trophies that will be useful in future battles. They leave behind a trail of bodies that stretches from the mountain to the river. The exact count will never be known, but the mathematics are brutal. Of the 1,700 British and colonial troops at Isandlwana that morning, fewer than 60 will survive. Some of those survivors are men who hid until nightfall, then crept away in darkness. Others are colonial auxiliaries who broke and ran before the main battle began. Not one formed British unit survives intact. The 24th Regiment of Foot, one of the British Army's most decorated units, ceases to exist as a fighting force. The regimental colors are lost. The officers are dead. The ranks are annihilated. It's the worst defeat a modern British army has suffered against a technologically inferior force. And news of it hasn't even reached Lord Chelmsford. 4:30 p.m. Lord Chelmsford is in excellent spirits. He spent the day chasing Zulu forces across the countryside with half his column, about 2,500 men. They've encountered scattered resistance, exchanged some gunfire, but nothing substantial. The Zulus seem to be melting away before his advance, exactly as he predicted they would. They won't stand and fight, he tells his staff officers over an early tea. These people understand they're outmatched. His officers nod in agreement. The day has been pleasant, almost leisurely. Some skirmishing, some marching, but nothing that would qualify as a real battle. Chelmsford is already composing the dispatch he'll send back to London. Another successful pacification operation in the colonies. Then a rider appears on the horizon, moving at a full gallop. Even from a distance, something about the man's posture communicates urgency. He's not riding with the casual confidence of a courier delivering routine messages. He's riding like a man fleeing hell itself. The rider nearly falls from his saddle when he reaches Chelmsford's position. His face is gray with dust and shock. He can barely form words. The camp. Isandlwana gone. Chelmsford stares at him. Gone? What do you mean gone? Overrun, sir. Destroyed. Everyone is dead. The general's mind rejects the information. It's not possible. He left Puliane with over 1,700 troops, artillery, and a defensive position. Against spear-wielding natives. The mathematics don't allow for what this man is describing. You're mistaken, Chelmsford says firmly. Perhaps a raid on the supply wagons. Sir. The rider's voice cracks. I saw it. The whole camp. There's nothing left. Another rider arrives, then another. All telling the same impossible story. The British camp at Isandlwana has been annihilated. The Zulu army isn't a scattered, demoralized force. It's a 20,000-man killing machine, and it's just destroyed an entire British column. Chelmsford's excellent spirits evaporate. He immediately orders a forced march back to Isandlwana. His staff officers are silent, processing the implications. If the reports are true, and the consistency of the accounts suggests they are, then the British invasion of Zululand has just suffered a catastrophic defeat. Worse, Chelmsford's own position is now desperately vulnerable. He's in the field with half his force, separated from supplies, deep in enemy territory. If the Zulu army decides to attack his column next, he doesn't have the numbers to defend himself. The supreme confidence of this morning has transformed into creeping dread. The march back is conducted in near silence. As darkness falls, Chelmsford's column approaches Isandlwana from the east. Even from miles away, they can see something is wrong. The camp should be showing lights, cook fires, lanterns, the normal glow of a military bivouac at night. There's nothing. Just darkness and silence. They get closer. The smell hits them first. Even soldiers hardened by years of colonial warfare aren't prepared for it. The sweet sick stench of death on an industrial scale. Thousands of bodies, already beginning to decay in the African heat. Then they see the camp itself. Or what's left of it. In the moonlight, Isandlwana looks like something from a fever dream. The white canvas tents are collapsed and torn, glowing pale against the dark ground like scattered bones. Wagons are overturned, their contents spilled and scattered. Equipment is everywhere, rifles, ammunition boxes, personal belongings, all mixed with bodies. So many bodies. They lie in clusters and alone, in firing positions and in flight, British red coats mixed with Zulu shields and spears. Some have been ritually disemboweled, a Zulu practice meant to release the spirit of a brave enemy. Others are simply dead, killed cleanly and left where they fell. Chelmsford walks through the wreckage in a daze. He sees men he knew. Officers he dined with the previous evening. Soldiers who saluted him this morning. All dead. All staring at the sky with empty eyes or faces pressed into the dirt. He finds the artillery position. The guns are intact but surrounded by dead gunners. The ammunition wagons are burned. The hospital tents are collapsed, the wounded killed where they lay. There are no survivors here. None. One of Chelmsford's staff officers vomits behind a wagon. Another sits down heavily, his legs simply giving out. These are professional soldiers, men who've seen combat, but nothing prepared them for this. This isn't a defeat. This is annihilation. Chelmsford's mind is racing through the implications. Over 1,300 British and colonial troops dead. An entire regiment destroyed. Artillery lost. Supplies captured or burned. The invasion of Zululand, the operation he's been planning for months, has collapsed in a single afternoon. And the political consequences will be devastating. London expects colonial wars to be quick, clean, and victorious. The British public has been sold a narrative of imperial invincibility, brave redcoats bringing civilization to the dark corners of the world. This will shatter that narrative. Chelmsford knows his career is over. He knows he'll be recalled, investigated, possibly court-martialed. He left his camp undefended. He underestimated the enemy. He split his forces in hostile territory. Every decision he made has been proven catastrophically wrong. But right now there's a more immediate problem. His column is exhausted from a day of marching and a forced night march back. They're standing in the middle of a mass grave. And somewhere out there in the darkness, the Zulu army that did this still exists. "Sir," one of his officers says quietly, "we need to move. We can't stay here." Chelmsford nods slowly. He's right. The camp is indefensible. It was indefensible this morning, though he didn't realize it then. If the Zulus return, his column will share the same fate. "Rorke's Drift," Chelmsford says. "We make for Rorke's Drift. It's a supply station about 10 miles away, just across the Buffalo River in Natal Colony. A small garrison, nothing substantial, but it's on British territory and it's their closest option." The column begins moving again, leaving Isandlwana to the dead. What none of them know, what they won't learn until tomorrow, is that Rorke's Drift has already had visitors. While Chelmsford's main force was being destroyed at Isandlwana, a reserve Zulu regiment of 4,000 warriors received orders to cross into Natal and strike the supply depot at Rorke's Drift. That battle has already begun. January 23, 1879. 4 a.m. Chelmsford's column stumbles into Rorke's Drift in the pre-dawn darkness, expecting to find smoking ruins and more bodies. Instead, they find defenders still standing. The supply station is battered, burning in places, surrounded by Zulu dead, but the Union Jack still flies above the improvised fortifications. A garrison of 139 men, most of them sick or injured, has somehow survived a 12-hour assault by 4,000 Zulu warriors. It's a miracle wrapped in horror. The defenders are hollow-eyed, deaf from gunfire, some still manning their positions because they haven't processed that the attack is over. The hospital building is a charred shell. Zulu bodies are stacked like cordwood around the barricades. The smell of blood and gunpowder hangs thick in the cool morning air. Chelmsford stares at the scene, his exhausted mind struggling to reconcile two impossible realities. Isandlwana, where 1,700 men were annihilated, and Rorke's Drift, where 139 men survived against worse odds. But there's no time for reflection. His column needs rest, water, and defensive positions. The Zulu main army could return at any moment. The survivors of Rorke's Drift brief him on the night's events. The Zulus attacked in waves, testing the defenses, pulling back, attacking again. They fought with the same discipline and tactical awareness displayed at Isandlwana. But here, in a confined space with prepared defenses and adequate ammunition, British firepower held. Barely. If the ammunition had run out, as it nearly did at Isandlwana, this garrison would have fallen too. The margin between victory and annihilation was measured in cartridge boxes. Chelmsford sends runners to the nearest telegraph station. The messages he composes are the hardest of his military career. British column destroyed at Isandlwana. Estimate 1,300 casualties. Zulu army strength and capability grossly underestimated. Request immediate reinforcements. The telegraph wires carry those words across Africa, then under the ocean to London. They'll arrive in the colonial office like artillery shells, detonating careers and shattering assumptions. The British public will read about Isandlwana in their morning papers and refuse to believe it. Surely there's been some mistake. Surely the savage Zulus couldn't have destroyed a modern British force. But they did. Back at Isandlwana, the battlefield is silent. The Zulu army has withdrawn to its homeland, taking thousands of captured rifles and vast quantities of ammunition. They've achieved something unprecedented, a complete tactical and strategic victory over a technologically superior colonial force. King Cetshwayo, the Zulu leader, will receive the news with mixed emotions. His army has proven its strength, but he understands the implications. The British Empire doesn't accept defeats. It avenges them. This victory guarantees a larger war. And the Zulus, despite their triumph, have suffered casualties they can't easily replace. Over 2,000 warriors dead at Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift combined. Another 1,000 wounded. The regiments that fought are exhausted, their ammunition reserves depleted. They won the battle but can't win the war. The mathematics don't allow it. The British Empire has millions of soldiers, industrial production capacity that can replace losses in weeks, and the political will to crush any threat to colonial dominance. The Zulus have courage, tactical brilliance, and perhaps 40,000 warriors total. It's only a matter of time. In London, Parliament erupts in recriminations. How could this happen? Who's responsible? Why were British troops so poorly prepared? The government scrambles to answer questions it doesn't fully understand. Colonial administrators who confidently predicted easy victory are now desperately explaining how savages with spears destroyed a modern army. The word Isandlwana becomes synonymous with military disaster. Reinforcements are immediately dispatched, not the small colonial force Chelmsford requested, but a full army. Fresh regiments, artillery batteries supply trains. The British response is overwhelming and inevitable. By June 1879, the reinforced British army will invade Zululand again. This time with better intelligence, proper fortifications, and a healthy respect for their enemy. The Zulus will fight brilliantly, but they'll be ground down by numbers, firepower, and logistics. The final battle at Olundi will see the Zulu army broken. King Cetshwayo will be captured. The Zulu kingdom will be dissolved, divided into chiefdoms, its military power permanently shattered. But January 22nd, 1879 will haunt British military thinking for generations. Every assumption about colonial warfare had to be re-examined. Every dismissive attitude toward indigenous fighting capability had to be reconsidered. The soldiers at Isandlwana didn't die because they were cowards or incompetents. They died because their commanders underestimated an enemy who fought with discipline, intelligence, and tactical sophistication. The Zulu warriors proved something that day. Technology doesn't guarantee victory. Training, leadership, and tactical awareness matter more than the weapons you carry. It's a lesson written in blood across 5 miles of African plain. In the decades that follow, Isandlwana becomes a case study in military academies worldwide. Staff officers analyze the battle, debate the decisions, study the tactical innovations. The Zulu Horns of the Buffalo formation enters military doctrine as an example of effective encirclement tactics. The names of the dead are inscribed on memorials. Puliyine, Durnford, Melville, Coghill. Officers who died doing their duty as they understood it, victims of their superiors' arrogance and their own empire's assumptions. The Zulu warriors who fought that day remain largely nameless in British accounts. Their courage is acknowledged, but their identities are lost to history. Thousands of men who executed a perfect tactical victory and then watched their kingdom fall anyway. Both sides paid in blood for a conflict neither truly wanted. The British wanted territory and imperial prestige. The Zulus wanted to be left alone. Neither got what they hoped for. Instead, they got Isandlwana, a day when shields and spears proved that empires could bleed and modern armies could die. The battlefield today is silent grassland. Cairns mark where the dead fell. Tour guides walk visitors across the ground, pointing out where the firing lines stood, where the horns encircled, where desperate men made their last stands. The mountain still rises like a crouching lion. The plain still stretches toward distant hills. The Buffalo River still runs brown with seasonal rains. But if you stand there in the late afternoon, when the light turns golden and the shadows grow long, you can almost hear it, the sound that changed everything. 20,000 voices, chanting in perfect unison. 20,000 shields, beating against 20,000 spears. The sound of an empire learning it could lose. Yendi.